There was a time when Disney dove headfirst into politics, backing a candidate who was larger than life, a figure who made waves with his unpredictable personality. An entertainer turned politician, beloved by some and utterly confusing to others, known for his simple, repetitive catchphrases, and yes, he was famously orange. Now you might think you know exactly who this is, but this isn't a businessman from New York. In the 70s, Disney's candidate was a bear who somehow found himself running for president. But this wasn't just about winning votes. He was being used, manipulated, and turned into something far from the lovable character everyone knew. Behind the smiles and promises, there was a much bigger game being played, and Winnie the Pooh was just the pawn. Winnie the Pooh, gentle, honey-obsessed, and running for president of the United States. It may sound impossible, but in the 70s, it was very real. Pooh was nominated as the candidate for the Children's Party, promising everything from a honey in every pot to longer recesses and his famous 5-cent ice cream cone. At first glance, it seemed like a playful, innocent campaign designed to entertain families. But beneath the surface, something much more calculated was hard at work. This wasn't just a charming stunt for kids. There was a bigger force at play, one far beyond Disney's reach. Pooh wasn't just a beloved character. He was a political puppet in a campaign that wasn't about politics at all. Behind the scenes, strange rivals emerged, nearly taking the nomination from him. Pooh even found himself starring in a Surreal TV special, so bizarre, Disney only let it air once. Clowns, monkeys, kids, trains, snowball fights, Miss Teen Florida. This wasn't about votes, it was about something much, much bigger. And right in the middle of it all was Pooh, caught in a campaign that was selling more than just presidential promises. In the spring of 1972, Disneyland launched Pooh Days, hoping to draw families in with free Winnie the Pooh records, souvenir photos, and parades starring Pooh and his friends. The stakes were high for Pooh Days to deliver headlines and visitors. But despite their efforts, the promotion wasn't catching on. It turns out you can catch more flies with honey, but Disneyland's honey wasn't sweet enough to draw in the crowds. In those early days of Disneyland, the park often used in-park events to generate media attention, with the hope of luring guests like flies to a trap. But when Pooh Days failed to deliver, Disney turned to an idea from 1968 that had a little bit more sting. Politics. If honey wasn't working, maybe a good election year buzz would. This time, they weren't just creating a campaign, they were trying to buy a candidate. Later that year, Disneyland struck gold with Pooh for President from October 21st to October 23, 1972. The park was buzzing with Tigger tape parades, Pooh-litical rallies, and campaign promises. Though you might wonder if these offerings were more like bribes for attention. Free posters, pens, and coloring kits for kids, meet and greets with Pooh and his Pooh-litical sidekicks, Tigger and Eeyore. Disneyland was certainly pulling out all the stops. And it worked. Despite competing with the World Series on TV, Disneyland officials reported an estimated 75,000 guests over the 3-day weekend. Huge numbers for 1972. Earlier that year, Pooh Days had failed, but this political stunt was succeeding. Disney knew Winnie the Pooh was never going to win, but did Pooh? Was he just another patsy in Disney's well-oiled promotional machine, paraded around to gain media attention while making promises about 2 birthdays a year, no more naps, a puppy for everybody, and that 5-cent ice cream cone? And while the crowds cheered, this wasn't the first time Pooh was put in this awkward position. He had been here before, making promises he could never keep. Pooh's presidential ambitions didn't start in 1972. They actually began 4 years earlier in 1968 at a family night event at the Hollywood Bowl. It would be here where Disney first tested the waters of a Pooh for President campaign. The crowd loved it, and even more importantly, so did the press. The Hollywood Bowl was packed with families, with 10,000 in attendance, and Disney knew they had struck gold. After all, what a better way to get free media coverage than through an election, especially one that involved the beloved Winnie the Pooh. The Hollywood Bowl event was nothing short of a spectacle. On a hot July evening in Los Angeles, they also brought in snow, 20 tons of it, to let the kids build snowmen. But instead, the kids chose chaos, turning the bowl into an all-out snowball fight, a moment surely never seen before in July in Los Angeles. And all while Pooh was there making grand promises, a honey in every pot, a hot fudge sundae every Monday, promising to export all spinach, and perhaps the most 1968 promise of them all, a good 5-cent candy cigar, which in later campaigns would transition over to a 5-cent ice cream cone. Pooh abandoned the cigar for something a little bit more sweet, hopping out of the pocket of big tobacco and right into the bag of big sugar. The Hollywood Bowl event proved to be so successful it got moved back to Disneyland at Tomorrowland. But, as with most marketing stunts, it didn't last long. When summer ended and the kids went back to school, the campaign was quietly shut down, months before the real 1968 election. It seems Disney had what they needed: the headlines, the buzz. But as for Pooh's political promises, well, they melted away with the California snow. 8 years later, in 1976, Winnie the Pooh made his third run for president with the slogan, "Winnie's a honey of a candidate." But by this point, the magic was starting to wear off. The first time you do something, people love it and ask for more. But the second time, they ask, what's next? And by the third time, people just don't seem to care anymore. Disney, however, wasn't ready to give up. They pulled out all the stops, the Main Street ticker tape parades, Pooh-litical rallies at the doorstep of Sleeping Beauty Castle, and even a special stage show featuring Eeyore as a campaign manager and Tigger as a press secretary, where guests could find Winnie the Pooh's official world headquarters at the Plaza Inn. Kids were invited to join the parade from Fantasyland to Main Street, and as always, they were giving free Pooh for President posters, pens, and coloring kits on their way out of the park. Still, in an effort to keep things fresh, Pooh introduced a new policy: more bikes and trikes instead of cars and trucks to help solve the energy crisis, and in true Pooh fashion, he suggested replacing light bulbs with lightning bugs. A very Winnie the Pooh twist on a very real issue of 1976. And still holding true to his dream of that 5-cent ice cream cone. Yet despite all of this, you can't help but wonder, how did Pooh feel being set up for a third run? Did he realize he was destined to be a 3-time loser? But Disney had a plan that went beyond Disneyland. This time, they were ready to take the campaign across the country to bring Pooh's presidency to cities far beyond the Anaheim Park. After 2 successful campaigns, Disney thought they could make Pooh's third presidential run even bigger. This time, they decided to take the campaign beyond Disneyland with the Whistle Stop Amtrak tour, starting in Chicago and ending at Disneyland. It was a grand plan, echoing the storyline of Walt Disney's own journey from Chicago to California. But the execution didn't quite go as expected. The tour was supposed to be a media spectacle, with Pooh making appearances at train stations in cities like Omaha, Denver, and Seattle. But most of these cities didn't take the bait. Disney's attempt to generate press outside of the theme park bubble fell flat. Very few outlets covered Pooh's arrival. One city, however, did make headlines: Reno. Unfortunately, it wasn't exactly the coverage Disney was hoping for. The event was advertised for 7:10 p.m., but the train arrived at 7:10 a.m., catching most people off guard. But the real spectacle might have been the cluster of winos who had gathered outside the train station, utterly bewildered by the sight of a dancing bear, a tiger, and what they thought to be a dog, but we know is Eeyore, prancing around at sunrise. One old man, more amused by the smiles on the kids' faces than the bear itself, hopped around excitedly and added to the strange scene. Disney's plan to expand the campaign beyond Disneyland was beginning to look like a misstep. But there was more at play here than just free press for Pooh. Disney had bigger plans, and they weren't finished yet. By 1976, something was different. Disney had once enjoyed front-page coverage from the LA Times and the Anaheim Bulletin during Pooh's earlier campaigns in '68 and '72, but this time, crickets. The media buzz, it just wasn't there. Disney would even go as far to create an ad that actually looked like an article. As a political campaign, Pooh for President was running out of steam. But while Pooh's campaign for the White House was fizzling out, another campaign had been whistling along all the while. A much bigger one. You see, not only had Pooh been sold a dream that with the help of Disney, he could change the world, but he'd also been sold out. Sold out to Sears, that is. Yes, the entire stunt, going all the way back to the beginning, wasn't just about fun rallies and catchy slogans and changing the world. It had always been backed by the power of big polyester. Pooh wasn't just a political puppet, he was a product, and his campaign had always been part of a much bigger plan to sell a whole lot more than honey. At first glance, the Pooh for President campaign seemed like innocent fun, a lovable bear running for office on a platform of honey and hugs. But if you thought this was about politics, you would be dead wrong. This wasn't a campaign, it was a corporate coup. And the real power behind Pooh? None other than Sears, the retail giant. Let's rewind for a minute and go back to the Whistle Stop tour. Sure, it seemed like a charming way for Pooh to meet his voters across the country, but why did it kick off in Chicago? Because that's Sears' hometown. What you talking about, Willis Tower? I'm talking about the Sears Tower. This wasn't about bringing democracy to the 100-acre wood. It was about pushing products. And the tour? Just a moving ad for Sears' exclusive Winnie the Pooh merchandise for children. Sears had an even craftier plan up its polyester sleeves. They ran ads nationwide, asking kids to register to vote for Pooh. The prize? A dream family vacation to the newly opened Walt Disney World. Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, there was actual winners, whisked off to Florida for the childhood dream vacation. But the real prize went to Sears. Every kid who entered was quietly added to the Sears mailing list and sent the Sears Wish Book, the holy grail of children's marketing in the 60s and 70s. It seems that your vote for Pooh was in all reality a vote for Christmas gifts for you. This wasn't about giving kids a voice or a choice. It was about getting them hooked on polyester. And just when you thought it couldn't get more absurd, Sears had Pooh himself on the campaign trail. Literally, he wasn't just shaking paws in the parks, he was popping up in print ads, TV spots, and even in-store appearances at Sears locations across the country. But wait, how could one bear be in two places at once? Simple, there was more than one Pooh. Yep, the real Pooh couldn't be in two theme parks, on a cross-country train, and at select Sears locations all at the same time. Disney cloned him. Pooh's political ideas weren't the only thing being stolen. His very identity had been franchised, out to keep the machine running. This wasn't a campaign for president. This was a campaign for profits. If you've been watching this video and thinking to yourself, whoa, Pooh seems a little off, well, you're not wrong. That unsettling feeling you get is proof that Sears took their power over Pooh a little too far. 1 month after Pooh's charming Hollywood Bowl debut, Sears thought they could handle a sequel. So what did they do? They teamed up with Miami's CBS affiliate, not ABC, WTVJ Channel 4 to produce their own Pooh for President TV special. But this wasn't the sweet, honey-loving bear we all know and love. Oh no, this was Sears' version of Pooh, and they didn't even try to hide the fact that they were bootlegging Disney's character. The result? A bizarre, more off than on version of Pooh, complete with a voice that would haunt your dreams as much as the thought of Pooh actually becoming president.
Running for president.
They threw in clowns, monkeys, and skits, all the hallmarks of that quirky, low-budget children's programming you could only get from regional TV stations in the late 60s and early 70s. But as you can imagine, Disney wasn't about to let this slide. The episode of Skipper Chuck's Playhouse aired exactly once before Disney pulled the plug on this IP infringement faster than you can say honeypot. I'm not sure of Skipper Chuck's Navy or nautical rank, but I'm sure he was just following orders. Oh, and in case you were wondering, Pooh did manage to win the election, but it was close. He narrowly defeated Rodney the Rotten Wolf, who almost won by convincing kids to take an anti-kids pledge. Yes, this really happened. Even though Sears didn't get Pooh's character right, didn't get Disney's permission, and didn't even manage to create a coherent plot, they did manage to get what they really wanted, another opportunity to promote their fashion line to kids.
And very exciting. You know, the Pooh platform is built on fashion, good taste in fashion. Let's show them what we mean. Our Pooh supporter friend is wearing a perma-pressed check shirt, and it comes in sizes 3 to 6X for $3.60. His Pooh fashion jeans are Admiralty Navy, and he has a Winnie the Pooh patch right on the back. They also come in acorn brown and frost beige, and he has Winnie the Pooh on his belt buckle.
Pooh wasn't running for president, he was running for Sears. The beloved bear was nothing more than a pawn in their marketing scheme, used as if he were just some guy in a suit working minimum wage to make ends meet in college, and not the British bear we all grew up loving, who technically would be disqualified to be president because of that small detail. By the time the 80s rolled around, it was clear that Sears had gotten everything they could out of poor Pooh. After all, being a 3-time political loser must have taken a toll on his once optimistic soul. That dream of 5-cent ice cream was gonna die. And why is there so much footage of people eating ice cream in Walt Disney World in its opening days? So what did Disney do to make it up to him? 5-cent ice cream? Hell no. They scaled things down, giving Pooh one last shot. This time, not for president, but for the mascot of Main Street. In 1980, Pooh was once again on the ballot, but this time the stakes were much lower, and the election was confined to Disneyland itself, where Pooh would run against Captain Hook, making it a pretty easy win. And again, I'm pretty sure somebody that doesn't have US citizenship. By the 1990s, they dusted off the election concept one last time at Walt Disney World. 94-95, not even an election year, Pooh ran for mascot of Main Street USA, once again facing Captain Hook, a villain who tried to steal the election literally every single time. But even in these smaller, humbler elections, Pooh somehow managed to pull through, with a little help from Disney, to make sure democracy and one bear spirit would prevail. But still, full-price ice cream cones. The election was lighthearted, just a fun way to keep Pooh in the parks and entertain a few guests. It may not have been the grand campaign trail of the 70s, but it was enough to keep Pooh happy. The Pooh for President campaign was more than just a marketing stunt. It was the embodiment of the end of the 60s and the start of the 70s. Children's entertainment and marketing were rapidly finding their way, and in the process, creating a tidal wave of new regulations. This was the most technology we'd ever seen with the least amount of rules. And each year, as technology advanced, so did the rules. tightening the reins on what could and could not be done. Pooh for president could never happen today. Politics have divided America in ways no one back then could have ever imagined. No company in their right mind would risk attaching beloved characters and childhood entertainment to something as polarizing as U.S. politics. Especially even when theme park fans can't agree on much anymore. Pooh may not have won his bid for president, but the innocence of that lost time in pop culture sure won me over. It was a simpler time when having a fictional bear run for president wasn't a cause for chaos and division, but instead a fun moment, a clever marketing piece, and let's not forget, a great way to sell a lot of children's slacks.